Okay, I think we're going to get started.
I'll leave the door open for a little bit to see if people are coming in.
It's a great turnout, y'all. There are 6 people who are here with us electronically. Let me show you. So you can see them, but they can't see you. So I kind of like that. How do I do this? Stop share. This is new software for us, so I'm just going to go ahead and say, oh, hey. So you guys can see everybody that's joined us. They've all muted themselves, which is nice, and we're going to take them off mute later when they are going to give their presentation. So joining us from NOAA, the NOAA team is Rebecca Love and Melissa Rosa, so the 2 that are up at the top. And we have fearless people from Richmond who are also on. Thanks for being here. Okay, all right, so now I'm going to share my screen again. Okay. All right. How do I make this go up? Okay, perfect. Okay, so welcome everybody. There's a sign-in sheet that's in the back. It's different from our normal sign-in because NOAA's tracking the people who are attending as well. And so I will know if you are a CFM and want CEC credits. Is anyone who's new and doesn't know my face, is anyone a CFM? Okay, sweet. When? Perfect. So that's easy for me to track. Okay, so we get CECs for all of our meetings now, which is great. So today, I would bet that this gets 2. Yeah. Last week we got 1, or last month 1.5, and usually like 1 to 2. So yeah, so I will follow up with you and everybody else. I know who you are. So I'll submit that. That's the only thing that the sign-in sheet doesn't say. Your email address will be added. I will add it to our CRS Workgroup email list. If you don't want to get those emails, because I assume you'll want the follow-up information that I send out in the future, after this round of meetings is over, then just email me and I'll remove you. I don't send out too many emails. It's not a crazy email list to be on. I just want to be sensitive to the fact that you might not want to be on it. Okay. So thanks everybody for being here. My name is Mary Carson Stiff and I work for the organization Wetlands Watch. We're a nonprofit based in Norfolk, Virginia, and we work in sea level rise adaptation, and we are proponents of nature-based solutions to sea level rise. And the reason why we're interested in the CRS is that it's incentivizing good sea level rise adaptation practices and providing economic incentive for open space preservation, which we love. So that's a little bit of background. We are going to do introductions. It's hard for me to turn this computer around, y'all, that are here via Zoom, because it's hooked up to so much stuff. And so I apologize for not being able to see the whole crowd. And if you all could just speak up so people in the room can hear you, and we'll not really worry about whether or not they can hear absolutely everybody. So Mary Carson Stiff, Wetlands Watch. Do you want to go first? North Carolina friends?
Yes, Harry Lee, GIS coordinator for County, North Carolina.
And I'm Laura Eddy with Nature Conservancy out of the Outer Banks of North Carolina. I've been involved with our CRS Explorer tool app, that kind of working with NOAA to develop this workflow as part of that development of that tool. Nice to meet you.
I'm Jason Literal. I'm also with Currituck County and the planning department.
I'm Kim Hummel, environmental planner, White County.
Tom Rodenbrack, my county, floodplain manager and GIS coordinator.
Meg Pittenger, floodplain manager, City of Portsmouth.
Cliff Sales, City of Portsmouth, GIS.
Whitney McNamara, planning, City of Virginia Beach.
Howard Nelson, GIS specialist, City of Newport News.
Edwin Phillips, GIS manager, York County.
Ken Nichols, CRS coordinator, York County.
Tim Crop, GIS analyst, York County.
Joe Looker, GIS tech, Gloucester County.
Oh, cool.
What title? Building official, CRS coordinator, floodplain manager, Ulster County, Virginia.
Jim Somerset, building official, floodplain manager, city of Coast.
One of your neighbors or something, or one of your zoning ordinance in years ago, but district planning and chief of floodplain manager of the services.
Vamos a hacer por el floodplain manager, city ordinance.
Ashina, CRS coordinators, coordinators.
Eric Bell, I work for the City of Chesapeake in Planning Department, GIS technician.
Cool. All right. Thanks everybody for being here. And on the line, let's see. Hold on. This is like watching a train wreck. Okay, let's do introductions for y'all online. Janae, do you want to go first?
Okay, hi, I'm Janae Prevost White from the City of Richmond.
Melissa, do you want to go?
Sure. This is Melissa Rosa. I'm the geospatial specialist for NOAA's Office for Coastal Management, West Coast region.
Oh, Rebecca, you're muted. Nope. Maybe it's your headphone.
It was just working.
There we go.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, great. Okay, so I'm Rebecca Love. I'm also at NOAA's Office for Coastal Management, and I'm based in Charleston, and I am a coastal management specialist.
Okay, great. And then Sheila Ray.
Sheila Reeves.
Oh, sorry.
Full name's not listed there. Sorry, Sheila Reeves, and I'm with Timmons Group.
Great. Thanks for being here. And I don't see Kristen's face, so we're not going to antagonize her.
I am here though, but I turned off my video because I'm sitting at home in my pajamas, and I didn't realize that you guys were going to be able to see me, so I turned off my video. But I'm here from DCR.
Awesome. Okay, great. Okay, thanks everybody. I love that. I wish I was in my pajamas. Okay. All right. So if you are here and you have your GIS data from your community, then that's great. If you do not have your GIS data, so Paul Cole from Gloucester, their GIS crashed last night. So, you know, these things do happen. You can use the OSP, Open Space Preservation demo data that NOAA has available. You can download it and use that as a guidance, and then just kind of translate it back to your own data when you get back to your community. And so if you want to download it, I'm sorry this is such a long address, but that's what you can do to get that. A couple updates and announcements. The VFMA workshop planning, so that I know that it's not even close to fall, but Ken is such on a rock star and on the ball with the planning. So if you want to say a couple things just about soliciting ideas.
On October 11th, we will be having the next fall workshop. Right now, it's going to be in Hampton, at the Northampton Community Center, right off 5 Lane. We had to find a bigger place because we're growing too fast for what we have, which is good. If you have any suggestions for topics you would like to hear, speakers, things like that, please let either myself or Mary Parson know. We want to make this as much directed toward what we need in the coastal areas, but at the same time, what you want to hear and what would be beneficial to you. If, like always, it will include membership in the VFMA for 2019, and this year we will be giving, along with the 2 gift cards, we will be doing a drawing for a free registration for the 2019 conference. So give you a little extra incentive to attend. Look forward to seeing everybody. If you have any questions about it, again, either contact myself or Mary Parson, and we can really be more than happy to get with you.
And we'll keep the work group up to date on some of our ideas. We really want to make it a standout event. And we're definitely going to separate ourselves from the Fredericksburg workshop. So if you want to attend both, you wouldn't hear repeat talks. So that would be pretty helpful. Okay, 2018 meeting dates. These are all available on our website, of course, but they're included below. We're going to talk about the May date. I already have a speaker lined up for that. Okay, so this is leftover from our last meeting. Ken has copies of some FEMA materials left over from a training. This is the list that he has. Excuse me. The Surging Seas CRS Guide update from Climate Central. So this is Dan Rizza. We talked about this at our last meeting. If you would like to review it, some of you have already contacted me and I've passed along information. It's a Word document that you can input your feedback and then submit it to me or directly to Dan. If you're interested in providing feedback, please let me know and I'll get you that information. I'm working on a new grant through CZM that's for this year, so following up on the cost-benefit analysis of the CRS in Virginia. I will be contacting, I've already met with the city of Portsmouth, and I'm just sort of getting the ball rolling on this project. So I might be reaching out to some of you, so thank you in advance for picking up the phone or meeting with me in person. CZM wants to know about data needs for our region to help build resilience. This is an ongoing conversation that seems to come up at various different meetings, and so I try to kind of keep track of what's said, especially at our PDC meetings, but I know that you all work in this field so very often, and so I'll be soliciting your ideas for what might be helpful. I know first floor elevations is like the #1 thing that everybody wants, so you can say that to me till you're blue in the face, and I know it's true, and I have it written down. So CZM will get that information, and I'll provide an update on what's going on to currently in the field of first floor elevations, as that is a big deal here. But things like that, data needs that would help you do a better job with resilience. The other thing that I'm going to be reporting on are program changes for the CRS that help better serve your community. So this is information that you know, the CRS isn't crediting in activity X, Y, or Z to help benefit a rural community as it would benefit an urban community, or usually it's the opposite. Or it seems that the CRS is focusing on riverine communities and not coastal communities in section X, Y, and Z. So it's that type of feedback, but it's also, you know, general stuff like we've talked about at other intervals, like the CRS is overly burdensome and the manual makes me crazy, things like that. I know because we've had those conversations, and so I'll be adding on those anecdotes that you've given to me in the past already, but just anything else that's come up, like erosion, the erosion data to get credit for coastal erosion open space. I've gone through such a rabbit hole with that, and I think that the way that the manual is calculating that credit and requiring that credit is bonkers. And so that's one thing that I'll be talking about in this will be a very brief kind of like list white paper. It's not going to be a big report. So again, this is some stuff that I'll be working on, so look out for phone calls from me or a request to sit down and chat. Our May work group meeting, I am, really excited about. I know that in some of our meetings, I've talked about these climate resilient mitigation activities that are available for FEMA funding. You all have some recollection of me talking about that in the past. So under the Obama administration, that's what they were called, climate resilient mitigation activities. Now under the Trump administration, they're called mitigating flood and drought conditions. But the activities that receive credit under the HMA grants are still the same. They haven't changed. And so These are the types of activities that you can get credit for under these new activities. And this is all part of FEMA national and then FEMA at the state level. So our VDEM is who administers our FEMA grants, adopting policies that move away from parcel by parcel based investment in mitigation and moving towards more larger scale mitigation, financing of mitigation. So this is something that Wetlands Watch as an organization is super interested in, because a lot of these activities incorporate nature-based solutions. And it also is moving away from the piecemeal adaptation approach of just elevating houses, which I understand is good for short-term and economic resilience and all of that. But looking into the future, I think this is the direction that FEMA is going to go, which is a good thing. And so basically these grants were made available in, I think, 2015. And then there's sort of been like silence at the national level on these activities. And now our state just got the go-ahead to make the announcement. So I think they're going to announce the grants available in May. So no one has gone for grants under these activities before. So this would be an opportunity for our region to kind of stand out and to, you know, be a guinea pig. We have support from Mari Radford, who you all know, who's FEMA Region 3. She works in hazard mitigation grants. She's really interested in our region, hopefully stepping up and selecting some communities to try this out. So I think that it's a good opportunity to learn more from Robbie, who's the grants administrator at VDEM, hear about how the benefit cost calculation works. You can use ecosystem services as part of our benefit cost ratio. And so I do know that there are some kind of creative ways to hopefully get some of this money. And I've talked to one community that has a specific area that they might be interested in going for this specific type of a grant. So I just think that the more that we can learn about the process and see if it would be a good fit for some of the communities here in our work group, I think it'd be a really cool opportunity. And Wetlands Watch is interested in kind of helping, you know, be a part of the conversation and sort of serving as a facilitator role. And so that, you know, back and forth coordination would be available to communities. Okay, so that's what's going to happen during our May work group meeting. Robbie will come, and it'll be a bring your grants manager to work group day. You notice this is all like part of an evil plan for me to grow our membership. So hopefully this will be fun for everybody. Yeah, Portsmouth is definitely going to be here. They're the ones that guinea pigged, hopefully. With this, there's also an opportunity to incorporate some of the student-led research teams that are going on with our collaboratory project, which is building off of the Chesterfield Heights HUD Natural Disaster Resilience Competition. So we have student teams from UVA, Virginia Tech, all graduate students, Hampton University, Old Dominion University, that are running around and doing sea level rise flood proofing of neighborhoods and doing kind of almost at designs for a lot of neighborhoods. And so Newport News has been a part of that, or Hampton rather, has been a part of that effort. So there's an opportunity to get free labor and near designs done at the same time. So just keep in mind that there are ways to kind of leverage a lot of the good activities that are going on to save money. Okay, so that's it for all of our administrative stuff. So I am going to stop sharing my screen and we're going to move towards this reason why y'all are all here, the open space training. So Rebecca Love, they introduced themselves. So I just wanted to give a little bit of background. So they are contracted through the Baldwin Group, and Rebecca has been working in this role for 14 years, and she's based in Charleston, South Carolina. So everybody was trying to get to DC. They had multiple meetings, and obviously DC is going to be in total lockdown here soon. Melissa is based in San Francisco Bay Area, and she has been doing GIS and remote sensing work for over 10 years in environmental science and natural resource management. And she's been working in the US and internationally. So we're really excited that they're here, and we so appreciate their flexibility and being present remotely. So that being said, ladies, just gonna hand it over to y'all. And you should be able to share your screens without needing any additional permission. So just let me know if that isn't the case.
Okay.
Great.
Can everybody hear me?
Yep.
All right. So I'm going to share my screen. Can you see my first slide?
Yes.
Great. Well, thank you so much for inviting Melissa and I to your meeting. We both wish we could really be there. We were supposed to rendezvous yesterday in DC and then take a road trip and come down there and be there in person, which would be much better. But I guess Mother Nature wouldn't have it. So I'm going to just give you a quick overview of the Howto product line that we developed this past year. And then I'm going to hand it over to Melissa, and she's going to walk you through the steps so that you can actually kind of dive deeper into your own data. But just to start off, the name of the product is How to Map Open Space for Community Rating System Credit. There are two different pieces to this, and we'll hear a little bit more in a minute, but I'll just move ahead. This is a screen grab of the how-to guide. Basically, it's on the web, and it was developed in September. The goal basically is to help communities earn CRS credits under Activity 420. And basically, we've been hearing more and more that there's more interest in Activity 420 as the number of points have increased that FEMA has offered. We've also heard that communities are more interested in just joining or participating and increasing their scores in general. So as I said, this is a screen grab. The URL is listed there, and you can just sort of navigate on the left and walk through the steps. So the how-to guide, it really focuses on the first 5 elements with Activity 420. So this includes open space preservation, parcels that are vacant and free of property. Also, you can get additional points for areas that are protected by deed restrictions, lands that serve as natural function open space, areas that are designated as special flood-related hazard open space, or coastal erosion open space. And the points, just as you know, here are just listed. Those are the maximum number of points that can be earned. If you're wondering why we are focusing on open space preservation, kind of similar to Wetlands Watch, this obviously is in line with our office's goals and mission. We want to mitigate flood risk and climate change impacts. Communities also have the potential to earn a large amount of points for this particular activity. And there are co-benefits such as water quality, habitat, recreational benefits. And then we're also trying to complement existing tools and resources that are out there, including some of the Digital Coast partnership organizations. And I'll get to that a little bit later. So as I mentioned, there are 2 different products as part of this how-to line. The first one is a step-by-step instructional how-to guide, and this is really for municipal and county planners and those that are involved in floodplain management, also CRS coordinators. It is not quite as technical, but it helps identify areas and places that could be preserved. There's also a GIS workflow, and this is for a spatial analyst or a GIS analyst that would be actually conducting the work. So this is much more in-depth and detailed, and Melissa will be talking about the steps involved with a GIS workflow in a little bit. Some of the supplementary documents that are included are just helpful resources. There's one before you get started. There's a worksheet for calculating credits and documenting parcel information. And all of the steps draw from guidance in FEMA's 2017 CRS Coordinators Manual. So briefly, I'm just going to show you what the steps are. that are included. The first one is to calculate your impact adjusted special flood hazard area. And this is just excluding federal lands and water bodies. The next is to identify lands that may qualify as open space. So these could be public lands such as local or state parks or easements, natural wildlife areas, or even things like golf courses or church retreat areas, or anything that is basically protected. And then you would exclude areas that do not qualify. So those would include things like roads or other impervious surfaces. The fourth step is to calculate the number of possible open space preservation credits, which is just the ratio of open space over the area of your special flood hazard area times the total number of maximum points. There are 3 additional steps in the how-to. The 5th step is to determine if parcels qualify for any extra credit. So those things that I mentioned earlier, like deed restrictions, natural function open space. The 6th step would be to gather any supporting information that you need for each parcel, and then to identify whether or not there are any opportunities to earn additional open space credit. So for areas that might be able to be preserved in the future if you can get the right documentation. As I mentioned, there are several job aids to make this easier. One is an Excel spreadsheet template, and that allows for individuals to kind of document the open space parcels. You can also calculate the total amount of credit that you would qualify for each parcel. And hopefully these are just going to make it easier to kind of keep track of those parcels and how much credit could potentially earn. And this can be found on the Digital Coast website. So the Digital Coast is where we kind of serve all of our data, training, case studies, anything that is on the Digital Coast. And these are considered quick reference training guides. So in our training resources section, you would find this how-to guide. And you can find both the workflow as well as the kind of online step-by-step guide. And then I just wanted to mention that we're working very closely with some other organizations. So within the Digital Coast Partnership, we've been working with the Association of State Floodplain Managers and the Coastal States Organization, who have developed a green guide, which I'm sure you guys have heard about. We're also working very closely with the Nature Conservancy, as Laura mentioned earlier, and making sure that our products are complementary and that the outputs of our product can be used with TNC's CRS Explorer. Of course, we also include the how-to, and then we've done a number of trainings with Climate Central, Surging Seas, and it's really nice because they offer some guidance and technical assistance in different activities that are not included. So we just want to be very clear that this is something that is new to us, and we're learning as we go along as well. So we're really looking to work with communities, do some pilots, see how this is working, what worked, what didn't work, how can we improve this. So over the past year since it's been released, we've done a number of trainings and webinars just to get the word out. But we also want to have some pilot communities that we can work with and just continue to gather that feedback. We also have several risk communication aids. We have a publication, a customizable handout, and PowerPoints for risk communication that have been helpful for some of the different CRS communities that I thought I would let people know about. And then, as I mentioned, we're always looking to do pilots and then basically just kind of share what was learned from that experience and do some knowledge sharing between different communities as we all are kind of working toward the same goal. That's it. I wanted to keep this short so you guys have plenty of time to jump in and walk through the steps yourselves. But I did want to point out that for the how-to guide, Elaine Voudray is our point of contact, and you can reach out to her or Melissa or I actually, but Melissa has been the lead developer for the GIS workflow, so her email is listed here as well. So any questions from the group? Are you ready to just kind of jump in?
We do have one question.
Okay.
Right.
How would you get?
Because properly in the proper area, we prune out the structure and make it like medium.
Yeah.
But it's in the first, okay,
You will get credit.
So the question is, Newport News has a pretty significant acquisition program, not even using FEMA grants, but using their own stormwater fees.
Okay.
So the question is, will they get credit for open space in addition to the acquisition? And the answer is yes. You can get double credit for the acquisition of the parcel itself, which you've done throughout the years, and you get credit for the open space that remains. Yeah.
That's great.
Anybody else?
Okay. No more questions here, y'all.
Okay. Melissa?
Great. Sounds like everybody's ready to dive into the data. Speaking of, I just want to check in with the room and make sure that those who are downloading the data from the FTP site are able to do that. I do apologize for it being a long address there, but I also wanted to clarify that the last line there was the name of the file, so I hope no one was trying to type that in. Has anyone tried to download the data and had a difficult time?
Is anybody using sample data? Okay.
Yeah, so either no problems or
Good to go?
Yeah.
Okay. Let's see. Share my screen. Okay. Everyone can see my slide here on the workflow?
Yep.
Yep. Okay, great. So just a really quick overview of the GIS workflow and why we developed this in conjunction with the how-to guide. As Rebecca mentioned, the how-to itself, is designed for planners. So, as Mary Carson mentioned, the CRS manual is pretty cumbersome and drives people crazy. So we wanted something that was a little bit more digestible for planners, and so they knew what information and documents was needed to be submitted to FEMA in order to earn credit. But then we thought that, this was an analysis that maybe a GIS analyst or practitioner who works with the planners in the planning office might want to be able to do within GIS. So we developed this GIS workflow and mapping guide just to make the process of mapping preserved open space and calculating potential CRS credit more accessible to communities with various levels of GIS capacity. So trying to make it a little bit more streamlined and also allowing people to have the flexibility to bring in their own data if they wanted to. So it's like a DIY version of this analysis. It's directly linked to the how-to, but you can also download the data. You can also download the document as a standalone thing. And there's also a GIS checklist in there just to help you get started, because this is probably one of the most time-consuming processes of this analysis, is gathering all the data sets that you need. There's also some workflow diagrams in there just to help you visualize what the analysis requires. And then at the end of working through this workflow, you'll be able to have and create these GIS output layers of parcels that are eligible for OSP credit, and then also your ASFHA, which is your impact adjusted special flood hazard area, or the denominator of that equation for calculating credit. So this is the GIS dataset list, and within the workflow, there's a table that contains this list of GIS datasets that you'll need, and then there's also some ideas of where you might be able to find these datasets. Here you see a snapshot of the Digital Coast website. This is a website that the NOAA Office for Coastal Management developed about 10 years ago. It's an online repository, kind of like a one-stop shop for all your geospatial data needs within the coastal management community. So this is a great place to start, but in a lot of cases, you may need to go to your city or county planning office website to find these data. And so we note that in the GIS data checklist, but I was hoping to maybe work with some people in the room to get some ideas of where you were able to find your data. So for folks who brought data to do this analysis, we thought maybe we can talk a little bit and share, where you got your data from. Because, it'd be really helpful, I think, for others who may maybe not know where to find local data sets to be able to share this information. So these data sets, the main ones are the community layers. So you have your SFHA, your community boundary. This is your city or county boundary. You have your parcels layer. Ideally, there is a land use field in there, but if not, you'll have a land use separate layer. And then there's the excluded areas. So federal lands, which are areas within your SFHA that you can't get credit for. Open water, which is both water bodies that are larger than 10 acres and large rivers. And then your impervious surfaces. So areas within the parcel where you can't earn credit. And then lastly, the preserved open space layers. So these are your protected areas, conservation easements, land trusts, and then also critical habitat layers and other natural resources that may be able to earn you extra credit for OSP. So I was hoping to be there in person to work with everybody on filling out this table. But I know Mary Carson had printed out some sheets. I'm not sure if everyone has them in front of them, but there's a GIS data checklist where I thought it would be helpful to work through and talk a little bit about where folks gathered these data sets from. We can talk a little bit about that, or if people are really eager and ready to go, we can start walking through the analysis and revisit this checklist later. So I'm pretty flexible.
So I'll sort of kind of engage people's interests. So looking at this, did anybody get your data from your GIS person prior to this? I know that the SFHA calculation is something that we've talked about quite a lot. And that's something that I think our community is, have been improving on. Tom, you've probably been through this most recently, and Kent in York County. So York County and Accomack County have just they did a pretty significant open space preservation ask during their last cycle visit. And so I know that they were working pretty directly with their GIS coordinator, and Tom is the GIS coordinator, so he was working with himself, to make sure that the area was as trimmed down as possible. And I know that I've been working with James City County and their GIS people to get that denominator as low as possible. So I don't know if you guys want to share what that process was like, or.
There's a difference for like North Carolina, like if we're going to talk about the sources of these data sets. For North Carolina, we have a state floodplain mapping department under our NC Emergency Management, and that's where Currituck County would pull their data set from. So
okay.
It's a state, and it's already clipped to the county boundary, or the community boundary. In this case, it's the entire county. So there's no necessary step for us in the workflow on step one to clip to the community boundary. It's already in that format. A FEMA data set would probably have to be clipped.
Right. And we don't have anything like that at the state level, so our communities are on their own. I know that we now have the VFRIS, but it's not, which is modeled after actually y'all's data. or your collection, that mapping, I forget what it's called. It might be North Carolina for us, I think. Anyway, but it's not parcel level yet. That's like in our next iteration. So that VFRIS mapping that Gina has presented on several times around the state, that will be parcel level.
This is Kristen Mary Carson. We have the parcel layers on there for all of the communities that gave parcel layers to VGen. There are a handful of communities that didn't provide any parcel layers, but it is just the boundaries right now because VGen doesn't have any kind of standard to include like real information with them. But we do have all of the parcel boundaries on VFRIS.
Okay, great. Yeah, so communities are working by themselves to get the data really so far for open space. Yeah.
So that is something that North Carolina does have. But from the federal perspective, the zoning different and how they actually what infrastructure.
Yeah.
That's one of the challenges we have is assessing the data to make a quality analysis of I'm going to put a damage function in that structure.
Mm-hmm.
How is it built? What is it actually? How do we do that instead of doing a survey of the structure itself? Do that on the database.
So I don't know if you all heard that on the Zoom call, but that was from the floodplain manager rep from the Army Corps of Engineers. She's based in the Norfolk office. And the comment is, from a federal perspective, working on, you know, multi-jurisdictional project is it's complicated here in Virginia because we don't have that consistent data scheme that North Carolina has. All of our GIS data is recorded quite differently. And I, you know, can definitely attest to that working with James City County versus Hampton and the open space preservation work that I've been doing. You know, everything is very, very different, not just the zoning, but the way that GIS would code conservation land, which is the heart of the issue. So.
Why VGen may only have the boundaries is because the data that goes online is so different.
Right.
So coming up with a crosswalk with everything in Virginia to make it fit is very,
very complicated. Yeah. Right. Right. So that does create a problem for standardizing things here in Virginia.
The firms are already clipped to the county boundaries.
Yeah, the firms, right. So all your firm data, right. So you're.
I mean, we had to clip out, we've got 14 incorporated towns in our county, but we had to clip those out. But for the most part, if you're Gloucester that doesn't have any incorporated towns or something like that, you don't really need to do that part.
The club.
Well, ours included a lot of the ocean and the bay.
Well, yeah, they listed water elsewhere than water. I was just talking about the community.
The actual boundary,
yeah.
yeah.
To clip it down to the city boundary and then start clipping all the water out because I don't have a layer of mainland ocean.
Yeah, so the comment is that the FEMA maps allow for the clipping to the county or the locality boundary very easily, and then it's just moving from there to do the additional eliminations of the large bodies of water, the federal lands, and then, you know, you choose whether or not to include all of your state lands or none, and so that needs to be a layer, a clip layer as well. I don't know if you all have that. That might be good to add to the NOAA walk, the the checklist, just because I think that a lot of communities decide whether or not to keep that state land either during a cycle visit or right after, not knowing maybe what the impact could be on your credit calculation. At least that's what I've seen. And our ISO representative has been pretty lenient with some state lands if it's managed by the community. You know, they're like, for example, in Chincoteague, you know, that huge refuge area is managed at the local level. And so there was a little bit of, you know, a little bit more dialogue about whether or not that could be counted towards the locality's open space calculation when it may not otherwise have been under the manual's standards, which there's a disconnect pretty often. Any other feedback on sources for this data? And the impervious surfaces, I wonder if you could speak to that a little bit more, because I think, again, this is an instance where our ISO person might not, you know, not that she's not following the same guidance of the manual. I just think that, you know, she hasn't required that our communities take out like walking trails and, you know, big parking lots, obviously for parks, but like, I don't think anybody's clipping roads out of their calculation.
Yeah, that's right. And it's, you know, it's all about data availability. And I'll touch on that a little bit more when we get to that step. But, you know, we're trying to be able to calculate as many credits as possible. So the more accurate you have, more precise geospatial data you have, the better estimation that you'll be able to get through this analysis. So we realize that a lot of people may not have high resolution land cover. And so we lay out a few options depending on your community and your GIS capacity and resources. You'll still be able to do this analysis, even if it's an estimation of impervious surfaces that are covering that parcel. Because we want to be able to capture how much impervious surface roughly is covering the parcel, because, you know, when FEMA goes out there and it makes these visits, you know, they're not going to be measuring the amount of impervious surface in the field, but, you know, they want to make sure what they're looking at on paper, you know, reflects what they're seeing in the field. So we're just trying to capture that through the geospatial data. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay.
Yeah, I think for us, she didn't look at it that much because of the question of scale. For us, we had 73,000 acres of open space. So if you're talking about a sidewalk in a park, that's not going to change your calculation that much.
Right.
But I guess if you're in a smaller community like a town, it would.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a good point. So the comment is, you know, for Accomack, 7,000 some acres of open space. 70. Haha, is, you know, that the analysis for impervious surfaces, the threshold is going to be pretty high for that to be considered. So I know that our ISO really doesn't pay attention to impervious surface. And, you know, I think, yes, for a parcel that, again, has like a huge asphalt playing field or ball field or whatever, basketball court, hello, I play sports, that she would pay attention to, but I really don't think that the impervious analysis has really gotten to our area yet.
Yeah, and I mean, that's really what we're trying to capture, not the sidewalks necessarily. Even with the high resolution land cover, you're going to get the parking lots, you're going to get maybe driveways and building footprints, but that's the finest level of detail.
But would you be excluding that from your calculations? That's what you're saying. So you would take all of the driveways and remove them from your ASFHA?
Yeah, if they're included in the impervious surface layer. Do you want to see how that works?
Yeah. Has anybody done that? Did people do that and I just don't know about them? Kent, did y'all do that?
I'm looking for it.
Okay.
And stuff like that. I don't know if the county still get that. So it might be directly available.
And that's the HRPDC distributes that, right?
Well, so when BJ would do his data acquisition, I don't know how frequently, but sometimes there's metrics that are along with that. But parking lots and roads and those kinds of things are included. At least in some data sets I saw, so maybe it's readily available. My data may not be used.
Most departments, like most, make that in-house too, because we have it.
Right.
We just didn't extract it from our, whatever that final layer was.
The area. So the comment is we have had data from planimetrics from our LiDAR in the past, and the idea is, you know, we could probably find that data and get whatever is the most updated available. And then another comment from York County was they have that data in-house. It just wasn't used as part of their calculation.
So how are you know, the folks who have gone through this analysis using GIS data, how have you done the calculations? Is it identifying parcels that have preserved open space and using that parcel area and then calculating credit that way?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it's been going through each parcel, like park or other conservation area, preserve, whatever.
Okay.
I think prioritizing locally owned properties first and then going to privately owned properties.
Right.
We also, in Accomack County, they got a ton of credits because they submitted a buffer area, our Chesapeake Bay Preservation Area buffer, which is required by state law and enacted at the local level. We get credit for that, and those buffers, because we're so low, are pretty much over our SFHA anyway. And so that calculation is a layer in itself because it's already mapped. So it's a 100-foot buffer landward of any body of water basically on the bay side, and then that is calculated just by what, you know, 100 plus water meters. Sorry, there's a lot of background noise. I don't know what is going on in the back. So yeah, so it was either done by just looking at the open space first and then creating layers that way, not done the reverse, which I think you might be. I don't know what's going on back there. Can you all, if you're not talking, I think everybody is muted.
Maybe it's the heater that just turned on.
Yeah, I think it might be.
Okay, let me try turning that off.
Yeah, that's much better.
Okay. Apologies. Okay, so maybe we'll move forward and start digging into the data. Does that sound good?
Yes.
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay.
Okay. So my computer. There we go. Okay. So I will show you how this works within ArcGIS, but first I just want to get a feel for you know, how many people in the room downloaded data and how many people in the room brought their own data?
Anybody else? Anybody download data? So we have 3 communities that brought their own data.
Okay, great. So maybe for other folks in the room who don't have data, maybe if there's space to just kind of peek in someone's laptop and see how this works if they can. but I'll also show you how it works on my computer as well. But okay, so when you download the GIS workflow, there's an overview of what's involved in there. There's the data checklist that I mentioned. And then this is the general layout of each step. So once you gathered all your data, then you can start working through these steps. And step 1 is where you'll calculate your community's special flood hazard area, specifically the impact adjusted hazard area. So you'll see the input GIS data sets that you need to do this analysis is your SFHA, your community boundary, federal lands, and open water. And here I'm using open water just really generally speaking, but that should include water bodies that are greater than 10 acres, and then rivers that are wider on average of 500 feet from bank to bank. And then when you walk through this analysis, your output GIS layer will be your impact adjusted SFHA, and then the workflow walks you through the analysis within GIS. So what we're going to do is we're going to clip the SFHA to the community boundary. I know some of you have already done that, but by going through this step, we're also selecting the flood zones within the special flood hazard area that are within the regulatory floodplain that required for this calculation. Then we're going to merge the lands and open water together, erase those areas from the SFHA, and then calculate the final area, which is your impact adjusted SFHA. So in GIS, so you guys can see my community here that we're using for a demo is Nag's Head demo data. We chose this community because TNC has developed a CRS Explorer app, and this is an online mapping app that communities can use to visualize eligible OSP areas and download documentation at the parcel level with a bunch of information that is required to submit to FEMA. So TNC is working closely with communities, gathering the data to develop this app. But we are working towards working with TNC more closely in concert so that we can help communities work through the GIS workflow, and then the output layers will be formatted and implemented into, or I'm sorry, integrated into the TNC app. So that's why we wanted to use a community here as a demo that's part of the TNC app. So we have here our community layers, and we're going to use our community boundary and the SFHA to select the SFHA polygons. So the way you do that is you go to your SFHA, right click, you can go to Open Attribute Table, select by attributes, scroll down to the SFHA field, which should be included within the layer that you download from the FEMA website. Depending on where you find the layer, there could be a 0 or a 1, there could be a T or an F. In this case, we want SFHA equals 1. Apply. And now we've selected all the areas within your SFHA that qualify as the flood zones that qualify for credit. Okay, we'll close. And then we'll clip that to the boundary. Running through this process, because you have these polygons selected, only those will be clipped or included in the output layer. So input is your SFHA. And your clip feature is your community boundary. And then output to whoever your working folder is. So I have a working folder here. And I already have these layers created, so I'll just say version 2. Save, run. All right, so your output layer should be your impact adjusted, well, your SFHA with the qualifying flood zones. Everybody see that?
Yep.
Everybody able to work through that okay?
Yes.
Okay. So now we're going to want to merge the areas that need to be excluded. So that's your federally owned areas and open water. The workflow will mention that you need to select federal lands that are greater than 10 acres and water bodies that are greater than 10 acres. But that was part of the checklist that we sent out ahead of time, so hopefully that's already been selected and you have these ready to go. So all you have to do is merge them into one layer. Oops, doesn't like the naming convention. So many federal lands, open water, and combine exclusion areas. You can name your outputs whatever you want, whatever makes sense to you. All right, so that's the areas that need to be included from the SFH flood zones. Okay, so once you've merged your federal lands, oh wait, I just want to check in. Everybody okay with that? Okay. So now we're gonna erase these excluded areas from the community's SFHA layer. Does anyone not have spatial analyst? The spatial analyst extension, because that's what you need this erase tool for.
I thought the erase was under analysis. I thought it was talking about lower license level on this laptop. I'm not seeing it.
So they're saying the way that they get to erase is separate, not through the spatial analyst.
It's through the license level of mark.
Right, so it's not the extension because it's a licensing issue.
Right, yeah, so the basic license doesn't include this tool. It's super handy, but I think you have to have one level up the spatial analyst license. So I guess the main question is, do people have access to this erase tool?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, no, so sorry.
Yeah, just because we moved this.
Not on the laptop. Sorry, we're working on it.
No, no worries.
We got back to our office.
Yeah. So they have it in their office, but they don't have it on this laptop. And one person doesn't have it, but has the capacity to do erase another way, right? Is that what you're saying?
Okay. There are workarounds if you don't have the erase tool. So if anyone has difficulty with that, maybe we can follow up afterwards. But I could just move forward because it sounds like.
I have a question.
Yeah, so we have one question.
Sure.
If you're using for flipping out the water bodies greater than 10 acres, went past that step.
Yeah.
In Currituck County, for example, that will clip out some of the qualifying lands, like it's wetlands.
The wetlands.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I kind of hesitated on that step. Like, do I do it? Because that's a qualifying
Right.
Managed land.
Well, and
OSB.
right.
But if I take it out of my denominator, maybe some of the other lands that are out there will count better. So it's just.
So the question is, what do you do about wetlands? And our ISO person doesn't let you clip out wetlands.
So it almost needs to, like, I clip to a shoreline instead
Yeah,
of clipping
exactly.
to water bodies.
Right.
So that's what I initially did because I kind of waited on that step because I was unsure
right.
of how that would impact that.
Right. So the community, so what we had done is select, so because this area, I'm sure is very similar to obviously Charleston area, you know, all of the water is connected at some point regardless. And so it all could be eliminated because all the creeks connect to a larger body. And, you know, that I've been told is fine to do with ISO's blessing or whatever. But the wetlands, because they are still, because they're not completely filling with water, it's not open water, we've had to clip to the shoreline and then have used the wetlands inventory, which I know a lot of people don't think is super accurate. But I don't know how else to do it. So do you have any guidance on that issue, what to do with wetlands features that may be included in an open body of water existing GIS layer?
I haven't heard of folks using a wetlands layer to identify water bodies. But with that said, you know, we're getting up and running and haven't worked with a ton of communities yet. So this is really interesting to hear. In the workflow, we point to the National Hydrology data set. And so maybe that would be a good data set to reference and make sure that you're truly using, you know, water bodies, areas that are permanently wet, right? Wetland features are permanently flooded, I suppose, you know, large water areas are inundated permanently.
And the people have done it in the room. Have you just used like a clipping tool and just done it manually? Or have you just, what have y'all done? Right, not wetlands. Yeah, I think we understand wetlands cannot be deleted, but
No.
Open bodies of water. With other data sets that y'all had, not using a national inventory.
We use all our local data, you know, other than the flood zones.
Okay. Everything else was local. Okay, so using all local data, not using a national inventory to get the open water features.
Okay. But it's local open water data sets, not wetlands necessarily.
Yeah, because you can't delete the wetlands.
Right, and you definitely don't want to.
Yeah.
Okay, so folks have access to erase at their office, but right now it sounds like that's not the case.
Correct. Or at least one community.
Okay, so you can use the union tool if you don't have erase, but I'll try do the erase first, and then I'll show you how you could do it with the union tool.
The union tool? Okay.
Yeah, so erase is easier, just removing these areas from your community's SFHA. So your input feature is that layer you created, whoops, which I removed. Earlier. And your erase is your combined exclusion areas. So we're erasing these from your community's SFHA. And then you name your output, save it. And now that's your final impact adjusted SFHA. If you're using the union tool, you would put in your community's SFHA. And then the combined exclusion areas. We'll say, save your output. So now all of those features are combined into one layer, and then you would open the attribute table and you would select any feature IDs that overlap with your exclusion areas. You could also start an editing session on that layer. And select by location areas from that union that intersect with your exclusion areas.
We'll probably do all of this stuff back because we already gone through it once with it. So I'm kind of trying to see where our final area is.
And then you can delete them. Oh wait, I did that wrong. I think it was the other way around.
Is this how you would do it, Tom?
Basically, I would have done it slightly different.
Yeah.
We don't, yeah, I mean, there's more than one way to. Yeah.
What, how does he do it?
Well, so he was saying that.
Normally in the table, there's a field for all the ones that came with the polygon that's got about with the water polygon that has value on all those.
You would just delete them based on the value that's attached to it.
Right, okay. Yeah, there's, I think I heard him say that there's a lot of different ways that you can do things in GIS, and that absolutely works. But, anyways, let's move on. So we have those areas removed, and this is your impact adjusted SFHA. If you were to open up your attribute table, you have a lot of these broken up features. So the GIS workflow suggests dissolving those features. And you can do it any way you'd like. Some people like to dissolve it by flood zone. Name my output. So then now you have an attribute table. It's a little bit more manageable. You have all your different flood zones. And then you just want to calculate the area, total area, because this is going to be your denominator. So, oops. Just delete everything. I actually deleted everything. That's why we have backup. Okay, so you have your flood zones. You would add a field. Name it whatever you like. Here I named it IA acres. Make it a double field. I'll just do it again. Okay. And then calculate geometry. Acres. Okay. So that's, total acres for the flood zone. If you want the entire area of your impact adjusted SFHA, you can use the statistics. You'll see the sum here. So your total area in this case is 4,088 acres. Okay, that's step one.
Could you zoom into an area, like a developed area, just so I can?
Yeah, so the question is, can you zoom into a developed area in Nag's Head so we can just see a closer image of what the map looks like?
Sure. So those areas in blue are your impact adjusted SFHA. So your federal lands are removed, the water bodies are removed, and the qualifying flood zones are included.
Can you go a little bit, sort
a little
of
bit farther in?
Yeah, to kind of like a block level.
Oh, sure.
Great. All those old lots, so long.
Any particular place to go?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
Oh, to the shade.
There's X.
Oh, shade. I was like,
So it doesn't, it's not right. No, but they changed. They look awful, worse than that. There's less floodplain.
yeah,
They're new maps.
yeah, those did. Those did. They really got.
They're really held up.
They keep that word.
Yeah, tell them the Hatter's Island right now.
Oh my God. We're just reacting to the flood zone maps not reflecting reality in coastal areas.
Oh, right. That's a whole nother meeting. So are we ready to move on to step 2? Any other questions?
Yes, ready to go.
Yes?
Yes.
Okay, great. So step 2 walks you through the process of identifying lands that qualify or may qualify for OSP credit within your impact adjusted special flood hazard area. So your input data sets here is the layer that you just created in step 1. Also, you want to bring in your parcels layer, land use if it's not included in your parcels layer, and protected areas. And so our goal here is to create a shapefile that contains areas within the parcels that are eligible for OSP. And this is to get at the numerator of the equation, the AOSP. So GIS analysis is going to walk you through extracting parcels from your ASFHA. You're going to query parcels for qualifying land uses. merge non-federal protected areas, because in some cases there's multiple protected area layers. We just want to merge them into one, and then use that layer to intersect with the parcels, and then calculate the area of eligible OSP. So going back to GIS, we have our impact adjusted area. So we're going to clip our parcels layer to the ASFHA. So your input features are going to be parcels, clip using your impact adjusted SFHA, and then save your output. I saved my output as parcels ASFHA, and then create another copy here for the demo. Okay, so the result is parcels that intersect your impact adjusted SFHA. So now we want to know how much of that parcel contains the SFHA. So we're going to open the attribute table. And create a new field. I'm going to call this SFHA acres double. Okay. And then we're going to calculate the area. So go calculate geometry, area, acres. Okay, great. So that's the amount of the parcel area that's within your impact adjusted SFHA. So now we want to select parcels that have land uses for qualifying OSP. There's a way to do this is to go to your land use field. Where is that? Here. So you go up to select by attributes. Land use equals, and then you would select all the different land use types that qualify. Could end up being a really long equation, so in the interest of time, I created a query expression to load here. So within this parcel data set, these are all the land use types that qualify. So once you select those, you hit apply. Oh, there we go. So we've selected parcels that intersect our impact adjusted SFHA that also have qualifying land uses for OSP. Okay, close. And now we're going to export that as its own layer. Alrighty. Name it whatever you'd like. Okay. And now it's its own layer. Oops. So those are all parcel areas with qualifying land uses. Any questions so far?
Yes,
so the question is, what about residential areas that have the RPA buffer that's part of our Chesapeake Bay area? And yeah, that would need to be included in the land use query that she created. So your RPA would need to be mapped. I know that there was an issue with potentially RPAs not being mapped in Chesapeake. I know that that has come up when we were talking with them. I heard that the Emergency Management Office does have that layer. I don't know if that's true. Okay, so that creates kind of a problem in trying to get that credit. I think you could probably do, you know, you could maybe create an RPA layer, like go 100 feet and then plus the water features and maybe kind of create one. I think that, you know, I don't know if that would be a problem for CRS.
So ours is where we don't have like surveys and stuff. We just have it buffered from all perennial streams.
Right. For the RMA, yeah. So I think this is a very our region, our state specific issue, but yeah, it would need to be included in the local data because there's no RPA statewide layer, and that is, you know, I know that the queries, from what I understand, Melissa, the land uses that you selected would not include private properties unless there was a conservation easement on it. Is that correct?
That's right. So in that query, there was easements and city parks and things that are, it's very clear that this is preserved open space. So I wouldn't select residential, even if you knew that there were buffer zones there. Like you said, Mary Carson, ideally you have that mapped and you would include that in the next step here where we merge all of our protected areas together and then intersect that with these parcels that we just extracted from the SFHA.
Yeah, and our communities, I don't know if other than Acrobat, have been keeping the RPAs separate because we did have miscommunication from our ISO coordinator about whether or not they would count. And so did you keep your RPA as a separate layer, or is it all together, Tom?
We broke it out in different categories because we had different things in open space that if they were going to throw it out, we didn't want to fit it with state land and RPA.
Right.
You know, we didn't want them to throw it out, so we had it broken down into acreages, a matrix, so that
you could,
they could exclude if they needed to, but so they didn't throw out and it fit in two categories.
Right. Like a preserve would be worth more points than the RPA itself. Right. Okay.
Okay, great. This is all really great to hear too, because, you know, I've created this to try and reach all communities, but, you know, just to hearing the ins and outs of what people are dealing with at the local levels is just really helpful for when we're talking to communities that are having similar issues. So thank you for these questions and sharing these data sources because it's super helpful. Okay, so we've selected the parcels with qualifying land uses, and so now we're gonna open all of our protected area layers. So if you have more than one protected areas layers, like you have conservation easements or land trusts or city parks or, you know, whatever separate layers that you might have, I'm gonna merge those all together into one single output. In the case of Nag's Head here, I just have the one layer. So I'm gonna pull that in. All right, so these are protected areas. Let's give them a color. All right. And you want to make sure that these are protected areas that are state or privately owned. These are not federal lands. Does everybody have their protected areas merged layer or just a single layer ready to go? Okay. So now you're going to take your protected areas layer and you're going to merge it with the parcels with qualifying land uses. So you have one single layer of all qualifying OSP areas. So geoprocessing, merge, protected areas, qualifying land uses, save your output as whatever you like. I think I called this OS.
So if you're combining it all into one layer, is it going to be broken out according to the attributes somewhere else? So you can refer back to what each thing is, because if it's all just one layer, you can't determine what gets the extra credit.
Yeah, so what we're going to end up doing is dissolving it and then calculating area and then joining it back to your parcel layer. Awesome. So yeah, so your parcel layer should have all that information in there. So in that output layer, actually, no, I'm sorry. We're gonna do that right now. So that output layer, we're gonna dissolve it. And you wanna make sure that you dissolve it by PIN number, your parcel PIN number, because that's what we're gonna use to join back to your parcel data. So now you have your dissolved layer. Before we join, we wanna calculate the area qualifying OSP. Add a field. I'm going to name this OSPC. Oh, you know what? Sorry, I forgot one step. A really important one. So your merge layer, you want to intersect that with first and then dissolve. You guys see that? Okay. So you have your merge protected areas, qualifying land uses, intersect that with the parcels in SFHA. When you intersect, you have all these different features, repetitive PIN numbers, so we want to dissolve by the PIN. So geoprocessing, dissolve. Pin. All right. All right, there we go. So now I have all your PIN numbers. Want to calculate qualifying OSP area. Double, okay. And it's the same as in the previous steps. So now you have your area of OSP. Sorry for the confusion there. Any questions? Was everyone able to follow along?
But it's, yeah, so that's true. Yeah, then you get extra for that.
We've been trying to do this, not just CEOS. Really?
Because our CEO, we have to have a regulation.
I wonder if that's more. No, we think you can double it. Huh. Well, we're gonna do that again. No, just because it's in the States, it's a bill on each public trust area.
Yeah, you should have most,
We can count it. Yeah. We didn't do that though, in like their compound, they counted that as open space though.
yeah, I mean. Especially. Okay, sorry, I was asking questions about the beach.
Oh, about what?
Sorry, I was asking questions about the beach and whether or not it's counted in NAGSTAD.
Okay.
I don't know if it's on this one.
Yeah, no, I mean, no, and I don't think she got points for that. And
Y'all are counting your beach, you will, right, Whitney?
I have not done that yet. I need to update our whole layer. It's just FEMA, so I don't want to start updating things until FEMA's told us. So I'm just waiting on things.
Norfolk does count they got credit, I'm pretty sure, for the Ocean View beach. So should be. Anyway, sorry, Melissa.
No, it's quite all right. Was everyone able to work through that part though, using their data?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm gonna move on. I know we're running out of time here, but just really quick, just touch on in step 3. This is where you would create your impervious surface layer. So your input GIS data set could either be from a land cover data set, regional or high resolution, or you can use high resolution imagery to classify impervious surfaces or hand digitize them, depending on the size of your community. So the analysis lays out all these different options for you, depending on your community's GIS capacity and what data layers you have available. So in the interest of time, requested that people bring an impervious surface layer already. Was that possible? Were people able to, was that available to the communities in the room that are doing the analysis?
Yeah. Some do, some don't. But we're gonna, those communities that don't have it, we're gonna work on trying to trace down that data.
Okay.
It was brought up by the Army Corps of Engineers, so we'll try to find that. But some communities in the room do have it, so I think we're good to go.
Okay, great. So that's all there is for step 3 here. You know, it just walks you through creating that layer. But since people have that layer ready, we can move on to step 4. So this is the exciting part. This is where you calculate possible OSP credit. So we bring it all together, those first 3 steps where you've created your impact adjusted special flood hazard area. You identified the area of parcels that are eligible for OSP. And then you created your impervious surface layer. So now you're ready to go and calculate number of credits. So your output layer will be eligible OSP credit at the parcel level, and also an attribute table with all the required fields that you can use to export into, export it from ArcGIS and then import it into Excel spreadsheet, because that's how FEMA documents these parcels. So within GIS, you're going to intersect the eligible OSP layer, which is the last layer you created in step 2, and your impervious surface layer to get an estimation of how much of that parcel is covered by impervious surface. So then you'll subtract that from the eligible OSP area to calculate your total qualifying OSP. So that's the number of the equation, and then calculate impact adjustment ratio. So try to do that quickly so we can end on time. As I mentioned, we're going to intersect the output layer from step 2 and your impervious surface layer. Name that whatever you like. Call this IS 2. Okay, and then we're going to dissolve that. By the PIN number. Actually, let's call that dissolve. All right. So these are all the parcels that have impervious surface areas. So that's why not every parcel that was originally selected with qualifying OSP contains impervious surfaces according to this layer that we used. So, but these are the only parcels that have impervious surface. So that's why it's less here. So we're going to add a field to calculate the amount of impervious surface within these parcels. And name this ISAC. Double. Okay, and then calculate geometry. Okay, so that's the amount of impervious surface within each of those parcels.
from your OSB calculation, or would you?
Yeah, so we're going to join everything back to our parcel database. So we're working our way there, and then we'll do some math within the attribute table to subtract the impervious surfaces. Okay.
The only issue with that, like when you're looking at our tools, flip it out and you have a polygon, it doesn't reflect the parcel polygon, which you're familiar with. Right. So it's going to look like normal and it will be hard to get it. So the reason they did it that way is, you know, as a planner or land manager, you're usually just looking at it. Right. So you can easy, like, I mean, I know it doesn't go in very well, like, look at it. Like, I know exactly where subdivision is. So you can find it.
Okay, so the layer that we created at the end of step 4 with our eligible OSP, we're going to use the join to bring in those impervious surfaces, those areas. It's based on that PIN number. And you choose the table to join to this layer is that layer that you just dissolved, where you calculated the impervious surfaces. And then you keep everything the same and you say, okay, yes, right click. Now you have all eligible parcels with OSP area with the impervious surface area for parcels that have impervious surfaces. So once you make that join, then you export the data to make the join permanent. And you save it whatever you like. Let's remove some of these layers. Okay, so now you open the attribute table of that output layer. You can see your OSP acreage, you can see your impervious surface acreage. So now we're going to calculate qualifying OSP. So you add another field, double field. I'm going to name this AOSP. Okay. And then we're going to open up field calculator within this field here. And this is where we do the math. So we're going to subtract the area of the parcel that qualifies for OSP. By your impervious surface layer here. And you say okay. And there you have your qualifying OSP area. So this is going to be the top part of the equation. Everybody okay so far? Okay. So there's a step in here where we want to round these numbers to the nearest 2 decimal points. So you can go to properties, numeric. To okay. And then if you have any parcels that are 0 here, you probably want to eliminate them. They're going to be really small. They're probably an artifact from all the intersection you've been doing up until this point. So I think it'd be worth deleting them. If you don't want to, you'd rather keep them in. I advise that at the end of this calculation to look at your parcels and just make sure that everything seems right before you move on and continue the analysis. So you can do that here, you can do it at the end. It's really up to you. Okay, so now we're going to calculate potential points based on this area of OSP. So we'll add another field. I'm going to call this OSP points. Okay. And then field calculator. So this is where you have your area qualifying OSP divided by your impact adjusted SFHA. So this is where you would manually enter whatever that number is. So remember at the beginning we determined it was 4,088 acres. And then you multiply that by the total number of points. So for OSP, main element, it's 1450. Here we go. Okay. And then you say, okay. And there's your points. Everybody okay so far? All right. So now we're going to join this to our parcel data set so we can bring all these numbers into that data set. Everything that has, information on ownership and land use and things that FEMA requires when you submit this information. So I'm going to go to my parcel layer, and you can use whatever you want. You can use your original parcel data set. You can use your parcel data set that intersects with the ASFHA. I'm going to use the parcel data set. Go to join based on PIN. Choose the layer that you were just working with where you're doing all those calculations. And you say, okay. Yes. Right click just to make sure that information's there. These are all null because these are parcels that don't have points. So if you just want to make sure, you can sort descending, and then you'll see all the parcels that have eligible OSP at the top. Okay. And then you can save that as a new layer to make the join permanent. And this is your final layer. So from your attribute table, you can sort again and select all of these if you wanted to, and then you can export that as a text file, and then you would name it and bring it into Excel spreadsheet. You could also clean up your attribute table a little bit more if you wanted to. So if you had a lot of fields in there and you only want to keep the ones that are important for this analysis and for submitting to FEMA, you can do that as well. But that's it. That's how you get to calculating OSP elements. And then the workflow also includes how to identify areas that would qualify for extra credit. So particularly it touches on NFOS 1, preserved areas in their natural state, and NFOS 3, critical fish and wildlife habitat. Because these are typically GIS layers that are available to people. So you would intersect those layers with your qualifying OSB parcel areas. You can also use the parcel database to select any deed restrictions that are associated with the parcel, and you would use your parcel data set for that. And then you just calculate the ratio following the same steps that we did earlier. So intersecting, dissolve, calculate area, join back to your parcel data set. So that's it. I was hoping to go through those steps, but I think we're at the top of the hour now. And I hope everyone was able to work through that last bit there. Are there any questions on that?
Any questions? Any comments? You guys who have done it feel like this was a good exercise or process? Just, yeah? That's great.
That's great to hear. I mean, this is still a work in progress. So if you have any suggestions on how to improve this workflow, or if something's not clear, we welcome any comments and feedback.
Yeah, I think that some communities will be going through this process, hopefully using some of the content that you all have created. And so I assume that at that point, people would be happy to share feedback. For sure, seems like. Any other comments? Thank you all so much. We really appreciate it, Melissa and Becca. I know that it's hard to do this electronically when you can't see everybody in front of you, and just appreciate your back and forth.
Well, thanks for having us. Yeah, and so sorry that we couldn't be there in person. You know, this is our first time actually going through this training, so we really would have liked to have been there. But I think we made it work, and again, thank you everybody for bringing your own data and working through this. And if you really, welcome any feedback, comments, ways we can improve, make it more straightforward, or enhance the workflow, just feel free to reach out. Rebecca shared our contact info. Feel free to reach out to Mary Carson, and she can forward your email to us. But yeah, we're here to help provide technical assistance. Happy to answer any questions you have.
Yeah, thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you. Yeah, we had a little bit of snow here during our meeting, so
cool.
It is definitely gone now, though. So we're just dealing with gross rain.
Good times.
Okay, cool. Well, thank you all so much. And I know we're at the top of the hour. Does anybody have anything pressing that you want to talk about before we adjourn?
Really quick update. So last month I brought up that we had a property that was irreparably lost, and we were trying to figure out how to get it delisted, or if we could get it delisted based on CIP projects, even if it didn't protect the 100-year flood level. It went through FEMA. Basically, we submitted an AW 501 with the supporting documentation of this is the level it was flooding at previously, this is the level it's now protected to. FEMA accepted it, and it is now going to be taken off the SRL list, even though it was not protected to the 100-year flood elevation. What was the reason? Because there was a CIP project that protected it from what was causing it. So if it floods again, it'll go right back on the list. But we protected it from a 2.5 level to a 5.5 level. So, hopefully it will flood again. There will be future projects that are protected to a higher level. But just for anyone else who's starting to do some of those CIP projects, they can have documentation of pre-flood and post-flood protection construction levels, you submit that to one. And I mean, I'm sure it's a case by case basis, but on this case, FEMA did accept that.
And was it just one property that?
We just submitted the one property. I haven't talked to Kim recently to see if we're gonna go back and try to submit some of the others. This particular homeowner had reached out to us to see if there was anything done, so that's why we pushed it out.
That's great.
Yeah.
Anybody else using CIP funds to prioritize mitigation? Did you have something?
Yeah, I wasn't last one, but have we ever really had a comprehensive discussion on what people are trying to throw on the wall and see what sticks to the wall as far as that? What we're all having, because it seems like it'd be nice if we came up with a list of different types of things that communities are getting through.
Right. Oh, I think that would be helpful.
Yeah, beach, like I didn't think
Yeah, the beach.
at all, and that never applied in Germany, so.
And just while we're sitting here, you know, she was talking about impervious surfaces, and I thought, well, if you don't have much other state lands, most of the roads are owned by VDOT, then maybe throw them out and you don't have much other state lands helping to work.
Right. I mean, that can really bring it down. Thinking about impervious surface in like Norfolk, like how can that, I want to know more about how that will work in actual practice, because it seems like you'd really be reducing your denominator to a degree that would be insanely helpful. I don't know if that's working the system or I don't know. Yeah, I would love to have a discussion like that. Or other people, that'd be helpful. Yes? You have a follow-up this meeting?
Maybe if we can all send you or something what has worked and what hasn't worked or something, or just as a starting point.
I think that'd be great, and then we can have the discussion based on whatever you all send me in the first round.
You can also do averages. VDOT would have how many miles of road you have in your jurisdiction, 2 lane, 4 lane. And if you could do it by average, it would be.
You mean reduce it. And I know that the Hampton Roads Transportation Authority did a study that looked at the roads that are in the SFHA. I don't know if anybody's looked at that from the GIS, if that data was released in GIS somewhere, but we can find out. I thought someone from the HRBC is going to be here, but we can look into that too. Because it already exists somewhere, which would be great. And that average approach is how I know that Stafford County did their RPAs based on the like more developed area versus the rural area. They just took a 10% reduction on the acreage, knowing that there would be some pre-1990 development and some post in some circumstances, which is definitely going to be the case in our area, unfortunately. Not in some of the better enforced CVPA community, but definitely not in our community. So that average is something that I know that ISO has said they're willing to do for estimating. Any other feedback or any other comments? So our next meeting is in May. We're talking about hazard mitigation grants or mitigation grants, all things mitigation grants, so not just hazard HMGB, but FMA, HMA too. And then we'll circle back on the open space, what's getting credit, what's not, right, stuff. I think that's a good idea. Cool. Well, thanks y'all so much. Thank you, NOAA friends, for being here. Thanks, Richmond people, for sticking through it. Hopefully you enjoy the snow. So glad we don't have it here.
It is definitely coming down.
Oh, is it? Oh my gosh.
It looks nice.
Well, be careful. Okay, thanks y'all. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.